Welcome back to Morning Express. Time for State of the Nation, and we showed you some footage earlier from the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. President Uhuru Kenyatta is in the country from The Hague, where he was attending his status conference yesterday, set to inspect guard of honor. I think he already has done that, and will be leaving the airport using Outer Ring Road, Jogoo Road, Landis Road, headed to his office. Kenyans have been urged by the Ministry of Interior to come out and welcome the president. So we'll continue to follow that for you. But if you're using any of those roads, I'd advise either leave now or you wait until after. It's going to be quite messy in terms of traffic. But to State of the Nation, joining me this morning, Gunjiri Wambogo is with me. I can call him also a political commentator, yes? And TJ Kajwang, who's Member of Parliament, Raraka. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you so much.
From this week actually, Monday, the president gives the speech. At the beginning, many thought, this is sounding like he's not going to go. I don't know about you both watching that and listening to him. And then he said he would attend. Now, we know one of the judges had dissented. She had felt that he does not have to be in court in person. And after watching the proceedings yesterday, many felt that, so what was the point? He was there, he sat down, he waived his right to speak or address court. Do you think he should have attended? Or rather, was it right for them to ask him to be in court, to summon?
Well, I think the attendance of the president in those proceedings is the best thing that has ever happened, not just to us as Kenyans, but I think to the African continent and the emerging nations in democracy. You see, symbolically, it is powerful message that Kenya is sending across Africa, that time has changed, that we must join the committee of the nations of the world in terms of justice, in terms of responses to everything else that in the global family we are looking at. And so everything else, there is politics, there is worldview, but as a Democrat and as a practitioner of constitutional law, I take it that the fact that the president decided to see that there is more that meets the eye rather than just what we have been discussing in Kenya, is a very good thing. So the despots of Africa, the strong hands of Africa, now know that there is a different dispensation. Kenya has awoken, Africa has awoken to the fact that there is something called the international world for which all of us really need to play part. So I think that he should have. In fact, I was worried before. In fact, for a long time we have had this discussion that he shouldn't attend. But young as he is, knowing the constitution as he does, I think now he realizes that he has shown the way that there is a new way in which things need to be done in Africa. Okay. And so I think it is very welcome in terms of the
precedence it sets, the message it sends.
For us who have fought in the trenches of democracy, I think that this for us is a gain.
Is a gain.
Yes.
Gunjiri.
I think it was important for him to go. There's absolutely no doubt about that. After watching yesterday, I'm not sure that he needed to be there, but for the reasons that TJ has given, first, it was more of the optics. It was a PR exercise for the country, for the continent. It was showing the rest of the world that yes, Africa has come of age, that we are not those guys who, there was a major contrast between him and Omar Bashir. It was stuck, and the victim lawyer, the victim's lawyer made that connection, though he was using it for his own reasons. But then the message that was going out there is like, you know what? It doesn't matter that you've been unfair, but we will follow the process.
But how do you then compare that to the fact that he is the one who rallied African leaders to come up with this resolution not to have sitting heads of state tried at the International Criminal Court?
The beauty of that is that Uhuru can actually argue he didn't do it for himself. The beauty of it is that Uhuru can actually go and tell the African heads of state that, you know what, I used my experience and I was telling you guys what I would not want any of you to go through. Okay. That is the beauty of it.
Yeah.
He can actually say that very well. He can say, you know what, this case began before I became president. I am president. I know how it's messing up a lot of my issues and my work as president. What I am saying, based on that experience, I'm trying to tell each and every one of you, we must agree that this should never happen to anybody else again. So he is able to go and continue and finish it. He's able to actually take a moral high ground with the rest of the African heads of state.
And say, I did this, but I do not want it to happen to anybody else.
Well, I don't see it as a high ground at all. In fact, some of us who are in the political world, we think that most of our leaders are captive to advice that they get from the so-called advisors.
Right.
And I think that for a long time, Uhuru has been listening to the advisors, but for the first time, he listened to himself.
So how do you tell when he's listened to his advisors and when he's listened to himself?
When he does things which looks like a head of state should do. Exactly, it's him. It's him. When you saw him going around the world, getting people like the Mugabes, getting the Musevenis to shove him around, you knew the guy was not working through his own thoughts. But when he responded to himself, he looked inward and said that this is what I have to do to my people. And Kenyans, we are just different in some way, even in Africa.
Yes.
And so it is not about moral ground. I don't think it's even a question of about what arguments he can make. He is just now an example to those old octogenarians that something needs to be done. You know, this case about Uhuru is not about the fact that Uhuru is guilty of one thing or the other. Nobody has ever suggested, and none can suggest, that he's guilty, because he is a suspect, and suspects must always have the opportunity to prove themselves.
So what is it about?
It is about justice. It is about tenets of justice that Kenyans, the victims, and everybody else who was related to this must see a sense of due process of law taking place. Now, due process of law will take the form of proceedings as it has. And even when one is not pronounced guilty or otherwise, the persons who are involved, the victims, everybody else will see that some procedure was followed, my case was tested, evidence was tested, and a judgment was given one way or the other. And so I know there has been a lot of thought, and people have said whether this should have happened, whether so-and-so is guilty. And so I think that the question is this due process of law according to the international set standards and according to the international instruments. And I think that is what Bensouda is following, that she is managing an institution, international institution, and that institution must be seen to be following a process of law. And when a decision is made, whichever way it is done, jurists or people who are involved would say that yes, there was something which is quantitative that was happening. I think that is the it.
So let's go to what we heard from the parties. And the status conference did begin the day before yesterday with the Attorney General appearing for the government of Kenya to talk about this allegation from prosecution that they are not supplying or giving the information they require. The prosecution wants to rebuild the case. So the prosecution yesterday then capturing what it is they have in evidence now. But what I found interesting is, on one hand, they say they have no evidence that Uhuru, the person, has obstructed collection of evidence. But on the other side, then they say he is the head of state that is supposed to ensure Kenya meets her international obligations. What do you make of that?
My personal opinion is that, first and foremost, it was really unfair that they did not allow the AG to participate in yesterday's proceedings. To be a friend of the court.
But isn't he partisan?
You see, the issue is this. Yesterday's case was entirely about the government of Kenya. They started, the opening remarks were, do you have any problem, do you have any evidence to show that Uhuru has played a role in the problems that you're having right now? Everybody said no. Then from there, the discussion was about the government of Kenya and its refusal to cooperate. With the strenuous connection of trying to connect that to Uhuru, the individual who is the head of state of the government of Kenya. Now, the problem I've always had with this argument is that this case began in 2011. Uhuru was not head of state. Uhuru didn't even look like he was ever going to be head of state at that time. It was confirmed when Uhuru was not head of state. By the time you're confirming a case, it means you've actually provided evidence to the court that convinces them that there is reason to actually prosecute this case to full trial. Now, we have a situation where we are going back and the prosecution wakes up and says, the evidence we have is insufficient. And the reason we have insufficient evidence is because the government of Kenya has refused to cooperate. We've asked them to give us telephone numbers, we've asked them to give us financial records, blah, 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 blah. Now, the question that this begs, whatever the status about whether the government is cooperating or not, is one, how did you confirm this case? On what evidence did you confirm this case? What happened to that evidence? Number two, so your argument is that we should punish Uhuru Kenyatta by continuing his case until his government agrees to cooperate. Because the court has been very clear in trying to make the distinction between Uhuru Kenyatta. They even refused to call him president in the courtroom. Uhuru Kenyatta, the individual, and Uhuru Kenyatta, the president. But the argument now the prosecution is taking, and the basis on which they're asking for an indefinite adjournment, is the government has refused to cooperate. Now they're asking the court continue holding Uhuru Kenyatta, the individual accused, until his government provides us with the information that we require. This is information that they should have collected even before he became. He's only been president for 1.5 years. So
is prosecution using Uhuru Kenyatta as a scapegoat for their failures from the very beginning in terms of gathering the evidence?
Look, there is a lot of splitting of hairs in this. When you are in the process of putting together prosecution evidence, when you are in the process of investigation, the question is a dicey one, particularly when you are dealing with someone who, first of all, he was in government, even though he was not the sitting head of state. He was a very strong member of the government, but thereafter he became president. Now, you see, the point is that the prosecution wants to reach that evidence one way or the other. And that evidence, they can only reach it because they are external body. They can only reach it using the instruments of government to be able to reach it. And so the kind of thing that we get involved in, whether Uhuru should have been the one who gives or who authorizes these things to be done or something else, is really nefarious. It looks to me as though we are hiding something. What mature democracies Bensouda is thinking is a system in which the government will say, well, so and so is a suspect. Come, have a look. These are the records. They are all there for you. Just look at them and find what it is that you want, you are looking forward. Because even us as a government, we would want to know who did what in this issue.
But the Attorney General then argues the prosecution, in essence, wants the Attorney General, to investigate for them. They're not being specific with what it is they want. It's a blanket request. So why is it that they don't seem to know what they want? He argues they're not being fair.
No. I think the Attorney General in this respect is not truthful. I think the prosecution has asked them specifically the things that they're looking for. They're looking for the intel in terms of the data of the telephone recordings. They're looking at bank statements, and they're not looking for everything in blanket. They're looking at things which are specific.
But on the phone records, they argue that there's no way Uhuru Kenyatta would have had one phone number. So they want to be told the other phone numbers and given the details of those records of those phone numbers. That's where he says it's too blanket of an issue.
The point, the argument, and this, ICC doesn't have a police force. That has always been the thing that we all know.
Yeah.
But we know they have investigators. They have an investigations unit.
Yeah.
Yeah?
And they don't have. Said they're always here.
Yes. And the defense says these guys are always in Kenya. So the question becomes, what are they actually doing? Because in essence, what the prosecution is asking the Kenyan government to do for them is investigate this case for them. We want you to find out how many other telephone numbers did Uhuru Kenyatta have. Give us their records. We want to find out how many vehicles did Uhuru Kenyatta have. Give us where they went. How many pieces of land does Uhuru Kenyatta have? How much cash does he have in the bank? How did that money move during that period? From who to who?
Yeah.
You know? And also, when I listened to some of the evidence that they actually adduced to yesterday, a lot of the things they're saying is, we have this guy who says he was dealing with this guy and he kept giving him money every day, and he said that he was being given that money by Kamwana. Now, there are actually a lot of connections that they're looking for that they do not have. The second thing that I would actually like to point out, and this is This is important for us to think about as Kenyans.
Yes.
We have an institution that we all believed was better than ours, than every legal institution we have today. Every time I look at the ICC in action, I actually think our Supreme Court, our High Court, our Court of Appeal would do a much better job than they are doing right now. The cases would be constructed a lot better than what we are seeing the prosecution has done. The other thing is, when you think about when you hear the prosecutor argue that the problem that Uhuru has is because the problem that they're having is because Uhuru is the head of state and head of government. You keep asking yourself, they want phone records. In Kenya, for you to get phone records, you have to go to court. You have to get a court order. They're not willing to ask for a court order. They want the government, and this is an argument that has been pushed a lot by the victim's lawyer. He keeps saying, Uhuru is a very powerful person.
If you wanted, go and say,
if you wanted this record, you just need to make a call to Bob Kolimo. Give me the records on this number. That's not how, we're not Banana Republic, for heaven's sake.
Let me say this. You see, the mistake we do is that we look at proceedings in The Hague through the prisms of the legal proceedings we have in Kenya. Legal proceedings in The Hague is not necessarily specific as one would think that there should be a telephone log, there should be how many telephones somebody has. What we are looking at in the general level, what is the general appearance of the government in its response to the issues that are before it. Gidu seems to be arguing for Uhuru Kenyatta, and I think that is where the problem is. He seems to be Uhuru Kenyatta's lawyer. I think that the prosecution would rather an attorney general who comes and says that
how is he arguing for Uhuru Kenyatta? Because he's argued in as far as the evidence they're asking for and the constraints he has.
What he has done is that he has created technicalities that exists, but technicalities which you take advantage of your internal systems to be able to put. So
are you saying they should be ignored? The Kenyan law should be out the window because we're dealing with an international
No. Exactly what he says. For example, a small thing like getting telephone logs. One does not have to look for a court order to be able to get the telephone logs. If the Attorney General wants to get that information, that is information which is available. You see,
but there needs to be a complainant. The complainant needs to have gone to court.
No, that's where you miss the step.
Yes.
Because if an international organization would have to come and then enter into the jurisdiction of this provincial state and then go into the nitty-gritties of getting a warrant, getting a telephone log.
But they're already part of this jurisdiction.
What they need to do is very simple.
Yes.
What they need to do is, for, as you say, pick a telephone call and ask Bob Kolimo that now these are the telephone logs that
your
I'm
lawyer,
talking about.
TJ.
Well,
Uhuru himself,
yes.
Let's make a point. Uhuru himself, his lawyers had to go to court to ask for phone records. Remember, there was that case which NGOs went to try and be a party of. He went to court to ask for phone records. I don't understand why
the difficulties
of the prosecution.
My friend, you would understand when we are dealing with the local systems, then we are dealing with the local jurisdiction and local legislation.
But he wants,
and so, just before you jump in, and so if you want my telephone logs, there is the constitution, then there's the law that protects my privacy and stuff like that. And so you need to go to the court of law and get those proceedings and get the warrant and get information that would come through. But now we are talking about an international investigating body. We are talking about an international, they rely on the government itself to be able to get that information.
But what do you say to this?
The question of privacy amongst citizens do not rise at all.
But you see, that is a problem.
But that is for us international jurists to understand.
What do you say?
That the question is now no longer about the interest of citizens per se. It is about the international human rights issues.
But the issue here is not even the logs at this point. It's the fact that they want to know those other numbers. The prosecution argues there is no way Uhuru Kenyatta would have had just one number, and they gave the last 3 digits of that number. So they want the numbers, then now go into the question of what's in those numbers, the logs of that.
Well, I think that if there was more cooperation from the government of Kenya, particularly the Office of the Attorney General, and in particular the investigation authorities, most of these issues that they are talking about. Look, if this case was proceeding elsewhere, all right, the government itself would have gone on its own way to try to find out exactly the question that is being asked, to find out how many or what conversations the president may have had at that particular time coming through the logs, and it is not very difficult to know. And sometimes most of us, even me sometimes, I don't carry my phone. I use my driver's phone, for example. I use my security phone, for example. But there is a way in which I can be investigated and I will be found to have used this phone, or I didn't use that phone. And if government itself went out to get that information, it is available. But if government puts restrictions about the niceties of law, it becomes an obstacle.
This is a very scary thing.
Bensouda is talking about.
This is a very scary thing.
There is too many obstacles that are being placed on the footworks of this.
What TJ is explaining is a very scary thing. What he's basically telling us is that once we get into an international jurisdiction, the protections that we have gotten from our constitution stop existing. That the fact that I have the right to privacy, I have that this constitution that we fought for, that TJ was right in the forefront of fighting for, he's telling us that at a certain jurisdiction, there are certain things that don't apply. For me, that is a very scary thing. And I would hate to imagine that when we domesticated the ICC, we removed some protections that I have in my constitution. That would be a very, very scary thing. Because the way I understand it is that the ICC, that jurisdiction became part of our jurisdiction, meaning that it works the way our jurisdiction works. So if I want information, if the police or if the government here has to go through a certain process to get certain information, the same thing applies for the ICC. However, the second point of this that we are forgetting, the ICC, the International Court, the prosecution has been extremely untrustworthy of the Kenyan government for a long time. They refused to give them information. They refused to tell them where the witnesses were. They refused to partner with them in a very big portion of this investigation for the reasons that TJ gave earlier. They felt that Uhuru had been a part of this government. He's going to be a problem to this government. He's going to be an obstacle. So they did a lot of their investigations outside the government. The government did not know what they were doing. When the investigators were here, they did their own things. They removed witnesses and took them to foreign jurisdictions because they did not believe that the Kenyan government was going to protect them. Now, when their case is crumbling, they come back and say, you guys need to help us sort this problem. This is a prosecution that refused to work with the Kenyan government in the first place.
You know, that is well put.
But it's true.
It is well put, and probably you are right according to how you look at it. But you can also look at it another way. The problem perhaps lies in what my friend Wambugo is saying. The problem lies on the fact that from the very beginning, the government itself put an obstacle on the face of an international body. In other words, nothing was possible. Even the access of the prosecution in the country itself was an issue. The question...
But look at how Ocampo was treated like a celebrity when he came.
No, just hold on.
Was like...
You will remember that most of the information that these people investigated, most of the information that they got their hands on were from people who were outside the control of government. For example, the human rights guys, there were the interviews that they conducted with because the government from the beginning, from the day one, said that this is something which interferes with our status quo, and so they became inward. They locked themselves. So it is still the same process discussion that Ocampo had, that now Bensouda is saying, you guys have to cooperate. You never cooperated from the beginning. You guys must cooperate.
This is my problem with that argument. Yes. My problem with that argument is that despite the fact that these guys did not cooperate, let's just assume that TJ is correct.
Yes.
Let's assume the government did not cooperate at all. These guys they came in here, and let's be very honest, we are an African state. We might be a democratic and advanced African state, but it's an African state. If the government wants to stop you from investigating in a kind of setting that we believe will be, I mean, ICC investigators went to Egypt. Was it Egypt or Libya? They were locked in for 2 weeks. This government actually created an environment that allowed them to do their work. They came here, they identified individuals through the help of NGOs, which government knows. They know it was so and so and so and so was working with the ICC. They identified witnesses. They transferred those witnesses from here. For you to move a Kenyan from here to another country, I'm sure the government knows that you've done it. Now, wherever they took them, the government may not have known where they took them. Now, this is my problem. We've had a very distrustworthy relationship between the Kenyan government and the ICC prosecution, all the way to the point where the cases started crumbling. For as long as the cases were doing okay, when they were doing the confirmation, and in fact, Ocampo was very arrogantly making the statement of, I have all my witnesses safe.
That they're going to make Kenya an example.
In fact, I'm going to make Kenya, it's going to be a storm. We've got...
Let's talk about another sticky area, because prosecution comes out to say that and the argument has been they want the adjournment to be indefinite, and the judges questioned quite a bit on that one because there's no other situation that has happened, and they admitted no, it isn't, but in this one, because of the unique situation we're in, then we need a unique decision. But the stickiness of this is that even if they were to get this cooperation, they, in their own admission, they're not sure they will be able to rebuild a case. That fine, today the Kenyan government could come and give them everything they want, but they admit, you know what, even after that, we're not 100%, we're not sure. Is that fair then to still say and ask for an indefinite adjournment, yet you're not even sure that will cure what it is you're seeking to?
Whether it is fair or not fair may not be mine to talk about, but what I think that comes out very clearly is that many international jurists practicing in this area would have to reflect on whether there are systems enough for a reluctant government, or for a reluctant subject, or for a reluctant system. Because basically, you may be fanning the case of a subject, but there is also a victim elsewhere. And this is not just in Kenya. This will happen in any part of the world when victims, whoever they are, would really want to get to the bottom matter. Many of the practitioners in these areas must be really thinking, so how is it that we are able, when our internal systems cannot get this involved, how is it that this international body can be able to give us justice? Now, I'm sure Bensouda must be looking for a longer adjournment to be able to piece together some of the things that are not working well. Whether at the end of the day, the case crumbles as he suggests, and I don't think it's a fair thing to say so. It is really something, as a spectator you may want to say so, but as a lawyer, the way the lawyer that I'm trained, I will have to leave the judges to be able to make a decision, because you never know until the judge spells his pen on paper. But the point I am making is that the question should be whether are there safeguards for those of us, the weak people of this world who are not in governments one day, that we will need a system that should be able to get us there. Are these systems proper enough for reluctant governments to? For example, if the Sudanese president were to go before the ICC, and of course everybody knows he's reluctant, and everybody knows that he has systems around him that can cloud this thing. Can victims in the Sudanese government be able to get justice because of these nefarious systems that we have?
So you're saying for victims' sake it should be adjourned indefinitely, then there is merit in that?
Well, I think there is merit in the fact that she should be able to get enough time that everything else that
but
needs
why
to
not
be
fix a date to it? We had the prosecution in a joking manner perhaps throw in some dates including the next election.
They're just looking for Uhuru to have left power.
Well, I think you are speculating.
No,
I don't think anybody was waiting for...
He said it in court.
He said one of the dates...
He said that one of the dates could be after the next election.
Well, I'm sure that must have been interposed in a very casual way. But the point is that, well, I think the serious issue should be that if there is a chance that there should be more information that is forthcoming, and if there are systems that would work to that, I think for the benefit of the victims, I mean, the head of state is enjoying, is comfortable, I would say.
But the benefit of the victims are the same, on the other hand, violating the rights of the accused, because he has a right to an expeditious trial.
But I got one sentence which captivated me. There are rights of everybody. There is right of the citizen, there's right of the subject, there's right of the victims. But I think that somebody said that balancing these rights. So, does the right of the subject become more important than the rights of the victims? Should the victims have as much time as they can to be able to, when you go to court, sometimes it's not about winning the case. Sometimes it's just the fact that you put your facts on the table and a judgment was made. Right. Perhaps that's what the victims are talking about.
You see, I have 2 points on this issue of victims. In Kenya, every time you talk about the fact that the prosecutor is doing a shoddy job on the accused, you are told, what about the victims? Somehow, we have created the perception that if the accused is let go, the victims will suffer. We've already assumed that this is a person who committed these crimes, and if you let him go, then what you're actually saying is that the victims will never get justice. That is the first thing, that's a fallacy that we first must remove. And it has been developed very, very subtly by the prosecution's office. They keep saying, and you keep hearing, the rights of the victims. The victim lawyer keeps saying that if you allow this case to collapse, then the victims who have been waiting for justice all this time will not have justice. My problem is this, first and foremost, the rights of the victims doesn't mean you frame an innocent person. And I'm not saying that Uhuru is innocent. I'm just saying that the fact that I could, and I saw somebody use that example yesterday very well. If I steal your iPad, you can't arrest him and then keep prosecuting him because, and you say that if we stop prosecuting TJ, then what happens to me? I want to know where my iPad went. And if you stop prosecuting TJ, I will never know. This is a problem. When Ocampo came here the first time, I remember one of the most powerful statements he made. When he was asked, are you going to arrest Raila Odinga or Kibaki? He said, no, I will follow the evidence. He kept saying that. Where the evidence leads me is where I will go. Now, my problem is we have a prosecutor standing up in court saying, I don't have sufficient evidence. Give me time to get it. Force the government to cooperate with me. Good points. My problem becomes, why does she assume this evidence is going to lead her to Uhuru Kenyatta? Why doesn't she stop this case? Because clearly she doesn't have sufficient evidence against Uhuru Kenyatta. Why doesn't she start her investigation?
Can I help you through the several problems that you have?
Yes.
Let me help you through them.
Please.
First of all, I have no interest in this, and I suppose that you are, looking at it in a very dispassionate.
I'm looking at it from outside, without the benefit of legal,
and not necessarily siding with any of the guys that are involved, and that is how I look at it. Ask yourself, whose rights are being violated here? There is a subject who is in court, and there is a process to it, and that process may take some time. But there is a victim also who is putting up a case. In fact, there is a victim, but there is also the international, what everybody seems to be forgetting. There is also the international village who is looking at crimes against humanity. The crown, the world of this world, watching about the crimes against humanity. Now, these fellows, if they have just a little more time, perhaps they put their evidence on the table. But the victim, the subject, the worst inconvenience that victim, that subject can be put is the journey to be able to get on a flight.
But what you say here is a little more time. Isn't the concern that there is no clarity on how long this will be?
I think that is a detail which they can really work around in the courts. And I think that it's really something which the lawyers should be able to bring. Something like a date, as my understanding of the Hague system is that the court itself is in charge of its own diary. Right. Even if you would want to take a whole year, the decision as to which date you are coming is not left to you as lawyers or as counsels.
Yes.
The judge himself or herself has a diary which will go on whether you want to fit on it or one you do, if you cannot fit.
TJ is a lawyer.
Yes.
I want us to just get out of the ICC for a minute. I'm his client, right? Some random guy. So first and foremost, a village has been attacked. Women have been raped, people have been killed, things have happened. Then some guy comes and says, the police wake up and tell me, Gunjiri, we suspect you are in charge of organizing what happened in that village. I call TJ, tell him, TJ, I want you to be my lawyer. Please represent me in this case. We go to court. 2 years, 3 years. Then one day, the prosecutor wakes up, goes to court with me in there, and he tells the court, Your Honor, I'm sorry. The evidence I have so far is not enough for me to actually put Gunjiri on trial. I want you to give me an indefinite amount of time to collect enough evidence, and then we will continue with this case. I would like to hear what TJ, if he was my defense lawyer, would tell that court. Because this is the situation we are in.
I feel that I'm not, of course, I will stand there and get myself ready and say, my Lord, my client's rights are being violated in the worst way possible. But there will be a prosecutor, don't forget.
Let me be the prosecutor who is now saying...
I think the prosecutor, without speculating on what you'll say, but should say that looking at the circumstances of how the investigation has taken place and looking at the obstacles that I have had, I think although Gunjiri's rights are being violated or can be violated, giving me some more days to be able to bring this on the table so that Gunjiri would be vindicated of his, acquitted of his charges or so. Give me some more days to be able to bring on the table. I think a responsive prosecutor...
He's leading more to the prosecutor than to my defense, so I will not ask him to be my defense.
You're not going to hire me.
I will not hire this man. You see, the argument I would expect my lawyer to stand up and make is, look, first and foremost, you cannot keep a case, especially of crimes against humanity, hanging over a man's head indefinitely.
Yeah.
That you cannot do. It is unfair, it is unjust. And you know, I listened. The prosecution kept being asked, give us a date. How long do you want? They said,
because as we talk about months, a few days, that's the biggest issue, that there's no date.
We gave you 6 months. They came back and said 6 months didn't help us.
Yeah.
So even another 6 months would help us. In fact, as we just want you to keep it in abeyance until the day the government decides to help, to cooperate.
Yes.
Now my problem is this. The Kenyan government, if for example it is true they're not cooperating, might never cooperate. So what are you saying? You want Uhuru to continue having a case over his head for the rest of his life? Uhuru could stop being president. These guys could decide to pass a motion to impeach him, and he could stop being president anytime. But the case, and then whoever takes over government could continue being uncooperative. The prosecutor is telling us that for as long as whichever government is in power in Kenya is not cooperating with us, this case against Uhuru should continue. That is unfair. I mean, in whatever possible way you look at it, Uhuru could be in power for 5 years, for 3 years, or for 7. Now, assuming he leaves and Ruto takes over and doesn't, or even Raila or somebody else, and decides, you know what, I'm not helping you guys. You guys said you're going to handle this thing on your own, you're on your own. They are saying we will continue having this case hanging over Uhuru's head. How does that even make sense?
All these are said are good things.
But that's what that's exactly what they're saying.
And exactly, you come off very clearly in defense of the suspect rights. All I am saying, and I think this is what most people practicing in this area is saying, we now need to have a government which separates itself from the convenience of the executive, that you have a robust investigation that would themselves bring this to you. I can tell you that there are several jurisdictions. Most in Africa that I can think about is South Africa. You know, something is brought and you will be surprised at how the prosecution, the police itself, brings in information that the president himself did not think that could have been brought. You know, it is so responsive that then when you are the president, you do not want to think that you can sit on anything. And so there is this nitty-gritties and the sweetness of how somebody can really make it very difficult for somebody to, and then it makes a nice case out there. But the thing that we are talking about is that we should now live to a situation. First of all, the president has shown us the way that nobody is above the law. Can we have now government systems, the Attorney General to start leading the way, that he is divorced from who is in power or what, and he will say, man, I have got this information, so you go and defend yourself. It is more about how do we appear to clean ourselves, that there is no interest, there's nothing we are sitting on just because we happen to be appointees of that government. So it makes very good defense argument what my brother is saying.
I want us to take a break on that note, yes. Gentlemen. We'll come back. I still want us to touch on the witnesses, because some would argue that prosecution perhaps also did not handle them very well. We've seen them, recanting evidence and all, but in terms of protection of witnesses, shouldn't that have been watertight to ensure, because even on Twitter people were putting up names, knew who it was, really should have happened, seeing these cases progress. And also the question of what implications, what defense said yesterday about that they will not provide any more evidence at all. They said they've drawn the line on the sand and no more evidence. What implications is that likely to have going forward? And son, we have a call online. Did you say that, Director? Hillary is online. Let's begin with that call. Hillary, good morning.
Yes.
Hillary?
Yes.
Thanks for calling.
Yes.
Share with us your thoughts. And would we please get some volume, perhaps, to...
Yes, I wanted to ask
volume.
my fellows who are over there.
Sorry?
Yes, I want to contribute on the ICC Status Conference.
Yes, briefly so, sir.
Okay, I want to ask my fellows over there. During the ICC naming of the perpetrator, they will name 6 people. And then out of 6, they withdraw 3. What does that mean? The naming as different things done, which was not done by the first 3. Of course, no. They are the same. Those people actually want to jeopardize our country by doing what?
I'm going to cut you short, Hillary, because you can barely make out what you're saying. I think we're having a problem with that line. Sorry about that. Perhaps you could just post a tweet. Let's try one more call. Hopefully the line will be clearer. Who's online? Good morning.
Hello.
Hi. Tell us your name and your contribution briefly.
Yeah. Hi. This is I'm from Moja.
Mm-hmm.
I'm great for me the 2 gentlemen in your studio. My contribution is that I'm talking about the victims, in support of the victims. Mr. President Uhuru is a person I like and admire, even if I didn't vote for him. But personally, I like him. He's a nice guy. He's a cool guy. I like him. But as far as justice is concerned, I believe that the rule of law must be applied. Even if there's an iota of evidence that there's something to this thing, let us leave these guys, the hands of the judges at ICC to rule it. Because right now, everybody in Kenya has become a law expert. It's like everybody has become a judge. Let us leave these guys for the 2 weeks to come to a conclusion.
Yes.
And we shall see the way forward. But for the victims, if... Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you, Taras. Just wind up, yes?
Yeah, it's not lost a person in your family. Hello?
All right, Taras, I think you made your point. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So, Taras, they're saying that even with the little evidence that there is, it should go on. But let's get to a question that Gadara is asking. It says, to pose to Gunjiri, 143, Section 4 of the Constitution, the immunity of the President under this article shall not extend to a crime for which the President may be prosecuted under any treaty to which Kenya is party and which prohibits such immunity. We've seen Kenya go to the UN and AU trying to ensure President does not eventually go to the ICC, but which we have since he has gone. What do you have to say to that?
2 things. First and foremost, the president has already gone to the ICC, so he's already
But because he had
accepted.
no option, some would
I mean,
argue.
he had. Bashir is there. Bashir refused to go.
Putting him in a tricky situation in the country.
But you see, he refused to go.
Yes.
So if Uhuru had chosen to refuse to go, he would not have been the first person to refuse to go. And he went. However, the second thing it is important, and this is something that this court is pushing for a referendum. to adjust certain things on the constitution. The reason for that is because a constitution is a dynamic document. You learn from experience. One of the experiences that I think we have learned from this particular process is that we need to be very careful about the treaties we actually sign, international treaties we actually sign, because when you put yourself in you put yourself under certain other jurisdictions. What you're actually saying is that, as TJ was explaining, the flip side is that you might be giving up some of the rights that you have as a Kenyan to put yourself in that jurisdiction.
Okay.
We are a community I mean, the world has become a village. However, this same world, if you're going to have an international law, then it must be an international law. It cannot be a law that America does not adhere to, that China does not adhere to, that India doesn't adhere to, that the British don't adhere to. Do you get? If it's international, it's international. If it is not, it is not.
It is not.
I think to answer the question that the viewer has presented, Uhuru has actually confirmed that section of law, that or the ICC process has confirmed that section of law, that that no president is immune from acts which are codified in international instruments that Kenyans have ratified. I love that. I want a situation where every sitting president of this nation, 50 years from now, will know that you do not do monkey business with Kenyans and think that you are above the law. That at some point, even if you are immune from civil or criminal proceedings, know that there are other instruments that are holding you as a member of this global fraternity that you will one day become accountable to. So this, for me, is a good piece of legislation. We need to clean up those international instruments, but the fact that every sitting president or everybody else in this country will know that there is a big brother watching, and that big brother is the fact that we are in a village called the world.
All right.
And you cannot just trample on people's
One
rights.
of the proposals, very quickly, Ngunjiri, that came out from yesterday's proceedings is that to deal and sort out with this cooperation issue, that perhaps the matter should be referred to the Assembly of State Parties.
Yes.
What action, what power does the Assembly of State Parties have? What can it do to end this impasse?
Well, I don't think that there is arrangements in state parties to be able to deal with this. I do not see a legal process which is credible that can do this. On a hindsight, but we have said it all the while, these are issues that we would have dealt with perhaps even more expediently if we used our local system. But that is what under the bridge.
The last parliament failed, Kenya.
It's not the last parliament. It is the same victims that said, well, Hague, so let's go Hague. I'm sure that if we had created our systems, it would have been, even the victims would have felt, because they would have been in the law courts themselves, seeing eye to eye, looking at their accusers or the people they are accusing eye to eye. It would have been perhaps a more recompense than what we have. But your direct question about the African state parties, I think that is just African politics. And I'm afraid to tell you, and I'm afraid to tell you that some of the things that we are having from brothers in Africa, particularly these guys who are not going to leave the scene for a long time, are really retrogressive.
Okay.
They need to pick up from Uhuru Kenyatta and see that, well, guys are becoming more, progressive. Let's let justice follow its course. Let the rule of law follow its course.
Before we hear from Ngunjiri, let's speak to Timothy and Bishop. Timothy, good morning. Hello.
Morning, I get you.
Yes, go ahead with your contribution.
Well, mine will be very brief. I'll be asking the lawyer in the house to interpret for me this. And I'm accused of a direct victim in one or another. Do we have hello?
Yes, go ahead, we hear you.
Okay, I was seeing it this way. I want the interpretation for the lawyer. Is the court plus the subject buying time? Because one of the persons there, in the Hague there, precisely said that they don't know when the date will be put forward for the thing to be done. Are they buying time so that the victims can heal, forget, and when it comes time, 10, 5, 15 years, everything is gone and we call it a day? Because for my observation is that this case is not there. It collapsed long time ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Timothy. We also have Bishop on the line. Bishop, good morning. Hello?
Hello, mimi natugoja tu.
Tuko hapa, ongea tafadhali.
Okay, sasa. Hello.
Yes, go ahead. You're live on air.
Mimi nilikuwa ninaongea kuhusu msaada wa ICC kulingana na vile niliona kesi jana. Halo? Kulingana vile mimi niliona jana, huyu prosecutor Benzuda alisema hana ukweli wa hii kesi ya President Uhuru. Na kulingana vile mimi niliona na kwenye maoni yangu, na kulingana maoni yangu vile mimi nilivyoona.
Bishop, sama maoni, hiyo maoni tumengojea sana.
Mimi ninaona kwamba kama ICC hawana ukweli wa hii kesi, ni kuitupa, maana haina ukweli. Maana ukiangalia kile sasa Wakenya wote wanatazamia ni hiyo jambo.
Sana. Sawa, Bishop, thank you. You had something to say before we move to the question.
Yes, first on the issue of the Assembly of State Parties. I think it's important. A lot of people, some of my former colleagues, especially in the NGO world, and my former colleagues in court, have been trying to push this argument that the Kenyan efforts to lobby the AU and to lobby the world to adjust some of the ICC tenets was wrong or was mischievous. And I'd like to connect that, and that's why I use the example of the referendum. Right now, CORD is going around the country trying to get Kenyans to support and lobby their to lobby Kenyans to change certain aspects of the constitution that they don't agree with.
Yeah.
They're following the law. They're doing it in the legal process.
Right.
That's exactly what Kenya did. Sometimes you come across a law that you don't agree with. Now, the problem is you can use underhand ways to subvert it, or you can actually follow the process. What Kenya did was follow the process. They said, look, we have Kenyan citizens at The Hague. We don't like how this process has been handled. We now have a situation where one of those citizens is a president. Our constitution says that we can't proceed with a criminal case against a sitting head of state. Is it possible for a situation like this ever happening to anybody else, for this to be adjusted because of the complications that come with it? So that's the first thing that we need to do. When people ask that, why did Kenya do this? Were they fighting this? For whatever reason that the defense might have, the Uhuru and his team might actually have done it, we also need to look at it from the bigger picture. The reasons why CORD is chasing for a referendum, they have personal reasons and national reasons. Yeah. However, number two, TJ, I'm sure you'll get back to that one. Number two, if the ICC goes to Assembly of State Parties, they're basically going to be telling the Assembly of State Parties, which is essentially like the club of members of the ICC,
majority
that
of
Kenya has refused to cooperate with us on the cases that we have. That is fair. They can go and do that, but that is a political process, and that again is a part of this case of this court that we do not see, that it is actually brought together by a political process. So again, we must ask ourselves, as we look at the way this case is proceeding, is this what we expected? Remember, we took ourselves, this is a point that people keep saying, we took ourselves to The Hague. Yeah? The reason we took ourselves to The Hague is because we believed that The Hague was going to give us justice. The reason members of parliament refused to listen to Kibaki and Raila Odinga, who at that moment in time were the two most powerful political leaders in Kenya, and went and defied them against a local tribunal, is because they did not believe a local tribunal would give us justice. They believed the ICC would give us justice. Now, I went personally, I feel very embarrassed every time I think about this. I went out and collected, was part of a campaign to collect signatures in support of the ICC. Today I look back and I'm like, these guys played us.
Okay.
They're actually the biggest problem to victims that we have right now. Because for as long as these cases are going on, we will never do anything else about victims.
All right.
I think it's time we stopped it and started something else that's going to help victims. Thank you.
My colleague Wambugu really wants to drag in CORD somehow into this story.
And I'm just
Until
giving
that issue
associations.
came up, it's really not an issue. I think, let me tell you for free, that this African process, this state of parties, was a diplomatic gift from the beginning. It was a misadvice. It was, in my view, being driven by our neighbors in Uganda. And it never worked. This is not how we need to do things. What Uhuru has done is what should have happened in the first place. Everything would have been smooth. Uhuru would have been even much stronger urging his case, because he would have been looking at the world, he would have been looking at the victims face to face and say, I am clean, I am innocent. All these things that they've been going around would have taken us ages where we came from. The belief that there is a way in which we can mess up and yet just clean it up, put it down under the table. And so for me, I think that where we are going, we shouldn't come back. We should go the ICC way, and let's get just a judgment one way or the other. And when that judgment is done, let's use it the way it comes. Then justice would have been done.
All right. It has been a spectacle watching the witnesses, those who've been recanting the evidence, and some of the things they've also been saying that they were promised a better life abroad, hence some of their testimony earlier. Unfortunately, some have died. Then the question of prosecution and witness protection comes into play. Do you think that was treated very well? Because the fact that people would come to know who these witnesses were, by the time they're in court, people are already talking about, oh, that's so-and-so. That means that wasn't watertight, and it should be very watertight.
I think you're right, although the question of witnesses recanting their stories, every criminal practitioner knows that that is something that he is likely to meet one way or the other. It is most unfortunate if some people could have been offered rewards to be able to say certain things or not to say certain things. I think prosecution standards don't allow that world over. But the protection, yes, I think that that was terrible. I feel for the people who are unmasked. And I think that these are some of the issues that we need to look deeper and see if we are able to protect our people, because I am not sure if next day I'm a witness, I would really want to step in those places, because I'm not so sure that I'm not going to be unmasked. But having said that, I think that on the whole, you've talked about people who have died. You've talked about people who cannot be traced. There is a suggestion that is agreed upon by so many other people also, that there are people who have been actively eliminating evidence or persons who could be useful for that case, and that has been tragic. Some of them have been eliminated very violently, and they have been exterminated, and this kind of things. So let us not go the banana way. These are systems that at the end of the day, you prove yourself innocent, you come back and get yourself in a job and do your job. If perchance that you are found guilty, there is a due process of law which you follow. Yes.
I want you to, before we speak to Churchill, Timothy was talking about the delay and this asking for an indefinite adjournment. That perhaps it's buying time so that victims can just, forget about this whole thing, and also putting in the aspect of justice delayed is justice in essence denied.
That's true. Then to first start on the issue of the witnesses, one of the things that really baffles me about this particular case is the way that when these cases were beginning, by the time they went to confirmation, one of the things that Ocampo kept saying is that my witnesses are safe. My witnesses are safe. All the witnesses I am going to depend on are not even in the country. They're in foreign countries, and they're being taken care of. So part of the problem I keep seeing is a situation where now the witnesses are not safe anymore. Remember, they refused to cooperate with the government. The Kenyan government didn't even know where those witnesses were. But we have a situation now where even the prosecution themselves are accepting that some of their witnesses lied to them. Yeah, that's the first thing. So there's a certain lack of due diligence done by the prosecution when they get these witnesses. The second thing that I find interesting is that nobody is actually asking the question of the fact that witnesses say the prosecution promised me that they are going to take me to a foreign country, they are going to educate my children, they are going to. This is incentives. This is actually bribery. The same bribery that the prosecution has been accusing defense of doing to change their witnesses. They actually actively promoted bribery of their own witnesses. Now, when you come and promise a poor Kenyan somewhere who's maybe was a victim of the post-election violence, maybe got displaced, then you promise that I'm going to educate you and your children, I'm going to relocate you to a first world country. What are you doing? That guy is going to tell you whatever you want to hear, so that you can do these things to him. And that is part of the problem that these cases are doing, these cases are going through. And when I say the disappointment that Kenyans face is because the reason we went this way is we did not expect witnesses would fall into this kind of incentivization program. We did not expect that they would get eliminated. We knew when we were saying we don't want a local process, it's because we were scared that witnesses would be eliminated here. So why would we go to ICC and then get them eliminated there?
Okay.
We just have done it here.
All right, Chichu, we'll still have him online. Hello?
I'm online.
Yes?
I'm hearing you.
Yes. Your contribution briefly, yes.
I want to thank you, Sophia, for being on the line. I want to contribute. My contribution is the issue of ICC was long back in 2000 before Uhuru became even the president. So the confirmation of charges was done before he became the president. So at the moment, I want to say the problem is not because he is the president at the moment. Ocampo had done his investigation. He had confirmed the charges. What I was expecting to hear yesterday was that there was sufficient evidence. But as at the moment, I'm seeing what we confirmed is not what we are hearing yesterday. So what is happening now is that we need this thing to be withdrawn so that Kenya can go forward.
Thank you very much.
We are very sorry. We are very sorry for what happened in 2007. Like me, I'm very sorry. But what I would like us to do is to go forward and forgive one another.
All right, Churcher, we'll end it there. Thank you so much for watching and for calling in. Let's move away from all that we've had from the court and what's been happening with the various parties to the politics of this a little. And you remember what brought these two together, Ruto and Uhuru, is this common destiny, this shared fate. It looked like the glue that really just bound them together. And we've seen them be very friendly. They look like really good friends, you know. But the argument then now comes watching how these cases have been developing. On one hand, you argue and others that Uhuru's case is crumbling and it might just, you know, be terminated. On the other hand, Ruto's trial is ongoing. And what is in the public domain, because some still have criticized that process and said, yeah, what is being said there, you know what, even that one is going to fall apart. But to be honest, what we know is about 10% because most of those sessions have been in camera. So we don't know what has been said there. So we cannot really just say how that process is going. What happens, and this is speculation, if one continues on this hard road of ICC and the other one gets acquitted?
First of all, let me say that I think, for the benefit of doubt, that the two guys have really played the whole ICC thing to their benefit, and any politician would do the same. And I think they have done a splendid job in trying to whip the nation's sympathy to themselves. Well said. But the case as it is going, and following Ruto's case as we have seen it go, if there was the speculation that you want us to look at, that Ruto's case were to go some distance and Uhuru's case were to crumble, as it were, the glue that put these people together, so to speak, would crumble. You know, we have said before, and I can say it on national TV, that look, the arrangement in Jubilee is an arrangement that is put together by wheat and flour. If the thing just dries up, the thing crumbles. And I don't wish that for anybody. And I think that everybody is going to get justice in the due process of law. In the courts, those people are not there so that they can be vilified or that there can be some mob, exerted on them. But if things go the way they are going, watch this space, because I see that I watch this space because the glue that ties the bounds would be shattered.
I'm one of those people who actually never believed they were going to pull this off. I have to admit that, and I know I'm admitting that on national television. Yes. I actually never believed that Uhuru and Ruto were going to pull off that relationship, especially because I come from the Kikuyu community and I know how we were feeling about that, about the relationship with the Kalenjin. But you know, wiser men than myself have said, you don't make peace with your friends, you make peace with your enemies. And what they did was actually make peace between two communities that had a long
But is it real peace, as he argues that it could fall
this is a
apart?
problem. When anytime peace is made between two people, whether as individuals or as groups that were enemies, you can only say it has been made because of what you're seeing. And what we have seen so far is peace was made. Now, there are a lot of things that still have to continue.
That peace.
First, there are things that threaten that peace, but then there are also things, there's a process. Remember, these are two communities that are coming from two extremes, as far as relating to each other is concerned. So any coming together, now they've come together maybe 10% or 20% from the extremes that they were coming in, but they're making progress. The only way they can go is forward. Now, there are people like TJ who might actually want them to go back to the extremes that they were in for political purposes, and there's good reason there. But I have a feeling that first, when these two young men, they're older than me, but we tend to call them young men vis-a-vis the political landscape, they sat down, they must have looked at the scenarios. And one of the scenarios they must have seen was this one. Because remember, they were not coming together to manage the Kenyan court. You see, if the cases were in the Kenyan court, they could have come together and said, once I become president, we remove this thing, we will fire Mutunga, we rearrange the court, we will kill these cases. They realized, they knew that they did not have control. They had seen Kibaki and Raila struggle to manage the ICC process and fail. So they knew that there was no, they also had a slim possibility of actually succeeding in managing the ICC process. So they must have had a scenario. I would assume for them to have run a campaign that beat us thoroughly, as called. That time was at COD. Yes, that time was at COD, my brother. We were with you.
So
yes.
Then ask them.
I'm talking about then. You know, we're talking about being beaten in 2013. These are guys who have their wits around them.
Okay.
They must have created scenarios of what would happen.
So you don't think it will catch them off guard?
I don't think it's going to catch them off guard.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to catch them off guard. And also, the relationship that has been formed,
it will stick.
The relationship goes beyond them.
Although it's not about the two gentlemen, it is about Kenyans. You know, Ngujiri thinks that politics is about how you and I will make an agreement and we go in our work. The people behind me are my voters, and they have their decisions to make.
Yes. So they could
If
sway.
I am going to be squeezed and I'm going to remain in Hague, and you have got your nice time and you have used your systems and you have gone away, I'm telling you that is the end of our
This is a point I don't agree with.
I'm telling you that
it won't
what I'm going to say, what I'm going to see, it will be, this has been a marriage of convenience. Once those nuptials break, everybody goes home.
Briefly on that.
This is the point, this is where I disagree.
Yeah.
I doubt very much. I think we're being very simplistic to assume that the entire Kalenjin nation,
but
as we
haven't
know
you
it,
already seen some noise and disgruntled people
but
from
they've not
Ruto's
been
background who have felt they did not get what they were promised
Sophia,
at the beginning?
They've not been shouting about Ruto's case. They've been shouting about jobs. They've been shouting about tenders. They've
Which
been
will
shouting
come
about,
back into focus if that were to
but you see,
happen.
this is, no, let me finish. TJ, let me finish. I need to make a point. I need to make this point, my brother.
I don't suppose that Ruto and Uhuru is about Kalenjin and Kikuyu. I mean, we need to open up this thing. It is not just because the Kalenjins are going to think that Ruto has this type of destiny or Kikuyu's Uhuru has this. I think there is more to it than that.
Which is the point I'm trying to make.
And voters are bigger than those two communities.
Let him finish.
That's actually the point I was trying to make.
Yes.
I was making the point that it would be very simplistic for us to imagine that the relationship between that formed Jubilee is made up of Uhuru and Ruto, or that the interests, because politics is about interests, pure and simple, that the interests that brought these two communities together to agree to vote together were just about the two people or about their fate at The Hague. These are two communities that have both had their people in power, for lack of another word. These are communities that are looking for more than just the fate of an individual, right? The mistake that would be made, and I do not think Uhuru is stupid enough to make that kind of mistake, would be if something happens to Ruto's case and then he completely sidelines the entire Kalenjin community. And I don't think he's going to do that.
Okay.
And if that doesn't happen, I do not see a situation where because there are two independent cases, and we've seen the independence. When Uhuru was going around the world asking for a deferral, Ruto said he doesn't want a referral.
So you think that union will stick?
That the
through
union
the storm, even if one continues.
the union will continue being developed.
Oh, continue being developed.
Yes.
Gentlemen, we
It
must
is a work in progress.
there, but a quick comment for you, Ngunjiri, on Sonko and the people he was with and what's the words on his T-shirt. But from you, Mheshimiwa, at
Why
least
did you ask Mheshimiwa that question?
No, that's not for me.
He's his colleague.
It's not,
Actually, let's hear you answer
he's
that.
his colleague in
You
Nairobi.
tell me what you think about Nkaliseri. I think Mashatani, Mungaro, some of those squad members we saw travel to The Hague in solidarity with the president. We'll start with you. Sonko there with that message on his T-shirt.
Well, I really do not know whether I need to comment. He happens to be a senator in a country where I come from. But you know, sometimes things are so wild you do not know whether you want to put a description on it. Let me just say that it is Sonko's right. If he wants to flash around, if he wants to go out there and hold a kamgomo or a haki yetu, if he wants to write all the beautiful words he has on his hair, I do not know where this word is coming to.
Were you embarrassed as a leader to see what was written in that T-shirt?
Well, I think
Do you
that
even know what was written? I can show you. This is,
I
in
think
case
that
you don't, don't think I want to repeat that. This right here is what was in that.
Well, you know, it is reprehensive. Let me come off it.
Yeah.
It is reprehensive. A leader of his stature, a senator of my county, leading serious people like I, to go into, you know, Europe and, you know, open himself to that kind of what I think is nonsense. Well, I think I still have to wait for him to come, and I will express this feelings to him directly.
Okay.
But I think it was reprehensible.
All right. Finally, from you, the CORD members who supported the president.
I think there are two events.
I think you have to ask me that again.
There are two events. There are two events that are happening in this country that are going to see a realignment of political forces. One of them is a referendum. We're going to see a lot of people realigning themselves. The other one is this ICC process, because politicians work around events. This is a good event. Remember, court guys have gone and humiliated Mungaro recently and removed him from being a chief whip with the most odious reason that he is not working at a time when nobody was working in court. Now he is, of course, looking for his own alignments, and this is an interesting thing that, and I'm sure it's a scary thing for court, because that is coast has been a court stronghold. And when you see leaders of the coast starting to make those kind of...
I look scared.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't understand it, but anyway.
I do.
Okay.
Can I say something
and
about
Chizuga
this?
as well has been now quite vocal.
But let me tell you something. You see, this is what we need to stop. And I think the media, we need to help our... Yes, I think. I'm bringing it in very conscientiously.
Okay.
Help us develop develop your stories from where it matters. Kenyan politics is about leaders. What I say today is more important than what Roraka people say. You go to Coast Province and hear what the people say. You would stop thinking about the Chizugas of these days, the Gideon Murungaros of these days. Kenyans have come of age. So next time you are developing a story, try to find out what people are saying.
So now it's our fault that the media's fault. Because it's always funny how it always goes back to the media when things are not working in your favor.
Sometimes I just wished that we develop stories from the mouths of the voters rather than from the mouth. Because as we'll say everything, and today you give me your vote, the next time I think that I have it in my bag and I'm going to negotiate it all with Gunjiri and thinking that guys don't matter whoever it is that I am leading. But I think that
it's the media's fault.
No, it's not the media's fault. It's just that the media develop stories. The juicy stories, of course.
They're from court, so we said that.
The juicy stories is from the mouth of politicians rather than from what the voters say. I know that, but I want to thank you so much for bringing me here.
And
but you asked a specific question, which I think should be answered. That those people who appear to have supported a system. I think that in ICC thing, it is not about parties here. I think politicians are talking from what they think their people are saying to them. They are talking freely. They have a right to speak.
So that's
their
why
minds.
You didn't go, for example. Your people don't want to.
Well, I didn't go, of course, because I thought that what the president was going to tell us in National Assembly is not what is perceived to be State of the Nation address, because State of the Nation address discusses things which are captivating the national values, rather than just the fact that I am going to a court of law, so you guys pray for me, and meanwhile I leave my deputy president to be
TJ Kajwang, Member of Parliament, Ruaraka. I wish you had more time to even talk about the short stint in power for the acting president. No, I think that's not acting anymore. He's back to deputy president. Ngunjiri Wambogo, thank you as well for joining us.
Sophia.
Really
Thank you so much.
Interesting conversation this morning, and thank you for staying with us.